Hello, 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 hello. We're going to see if this works. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? I'll wait till I get a confirmation. I always sort of mess up stuff setting these things up. So I want to make sure I'm good before we are good here. Okay, I have some confirmations. Everyone can hear me. First, before we get going here, um, I have a new course coming out in the last day of April, aka I think it's April 30th, is going to be animating React. We're using React Spring to do all sorts of animations, some of which you may see today just by happenstance of me clicking around. So, hey everybody. What we're going to be doing in this live stream is basically I'm going to be showing you around my global state system. Now, this state system doesn't handle data, as in it doesn't handle my data coming in from my API because that's all handled through Apollo. I'm not using Apollo State Link anymore, and I'm not using Redux anymore. I could go into more in depth about that afterwards. I'm using React Context. It's exceedingly simple. It gives me a lot of freedom, and it's using React hooks. So this will all be using React hooks, and everything sort of filters through this provider I have that groups all of other providers together, of which I've made pinned as a comment in the video, so you can check that out. I'll post it in the comments as well. Um, I'm not going to necessarily declare that this is the right way or this is the way to do this. This is just a way that I've experimented with and a way that is worked for me in my use cases. So if you think there's something wrong with this or you don't like this, you by all means, either let me know or tell me a way it can be better. This is a new system that I've just cooked up here, so I want to see what people talk about it. So let's said let's dive into some code. Um, yeah, so this is the Level Up tutorial site. I use my global state to do things like here's the that's a CSS issue. I use my global state to do things like this menu. Now, why? There's a lot of things that maybe this menu controls. Um, for instance, maybe I want this menu to open or close at any given point. I use my global state for let's log out here. I use my global state for this login and logout. And I do this because, again, I want to have full control over when the register pops up, when the login pops up, what can open. No, not now. Last pass. Which things can open and close this. I also use global state for things like the shopping cart, these buy now buttons. When something's added to the cart, removed from the cart, that's all global state, as well as if you're signing up to become a pro. All of the animations you see on the site, by the way, are React Spring. That said, I'm redoing a lot of it. This is the live version of Level Up tutorials. You want to see the current version of Level Up tutorials? Check it out. This thing is rough right now. We've basically ripped out most of the CSS, but there's some really cool stuff happening in here. I'll show you this little animation. This is all done with React Spring. Oh yeah, this is gonna be sick. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening. Either way, regardless, between this and the way that I'm doing it here, the CSS part of things hasn't changed. This menu still works. Logins, logouts, all will still work. Although they're ugly, they're significantly ugly right now. The CSS is it's in flux to say the least. Okay, so let's get into how I actually manage state in this beautifully destroyed website right now. Um, let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so the first thing that we need to know is that I am using hooks and context. Um, I have, let's see if you can see this over here. I don't know if I can zoom in, but if I make the interface bigger, you could see I have a global state folder. Inside of that global state folder is my different context providers. I have an alert provider, a checkout provider, and a login window provider, and then an index and a state file. Now, I've separated all of these for a very specific reason. I've separated my contexts because I don't want, if I add something to the cart, I don't want my context from alert to be affected in any sort of way. If I open or close a menu, I don't want the shopping cart to be affected. I don't want any sort of re-renders happening. I want to keep them all sort of siloed and segmented. And so for a long time, I was thinking, well, okay, I'll just make several different providers, right? So let me see. I have the alert provider. Okay. I have the alert provider. Don't worry, I'll buzz through these more. I have the alert provider. I have the checkout provider, which is pretty complex. It has add to cart, remove to cart, that sort of thing. And then I have the login window provider or the login provider. Um, so I was thinking, oh, this is great, but now I have to like wrap my whole app in all of these providers. Um, and I'll go into detail about what these providers are doing. And so I didn't like that. And so I Googled around a bit and I found this really excellent snippet of code. And I went looking for it before this live stream because I couldn't find it. Um, so if you are out there and you wrote this provider composer, please make yourself be known because I use this and I really love it. So this is really the heart of my thing. Basically, I've created several different context providers and I'm using this provider composer function to take in all of my providers and then combine them essentially to hide them from view so I don't have to have super nested deep of all these providers. And that creates one context provider where the context provider is simply outputting this provider composer with all of my contexts. Now, if you want to use this, again, I didn't make this up. I didn't write this. If you would like to use this, this is available in the description as a pinned comment. And it's basically all it is it accepts an array of providers and spits out a context provider. Now, with this context provider, I'm just wrapping my app in context provider. Ignore these routes. These are all legacy and will be changed. Um, but all I did was wrap my app in context provider. Bingo, that's it. So I've created these different providers and I just wrap my app in context provider. Let's dive into one of the easy context providers like the login one, okay? Now, in the login window context provider, I have created a context, my login context. Okay. And then I have a function, which is my provider. And then because this is using the latest version of React, I have access to React hooks. And what I've done here is I have a couple of React hooks, which is just simply is login open and set login open. So we have a function and the current value of the login open. Next, we have form type, set form type, and these are both just use state. Now you can get into this and use UseReducer if you want to have some reduxy sort of style goodness, or you can use state if it's a basic toggle. I use state because it's a basic toggle and it's super easy. I don't need any sort of added complexities here. Um, and so that's good for me. Okay. Next thing I have is my login context provider, where I have created the provider for login context and I'm passing in these values and I'm simply exporting this login provider, which is the same thing that I import and combine with my other providers. So because of that, I now have access to all of these functions and values anytime I want to use context via React hooks. Let me show you just how awesome this is. If I think it's in the main nav. So in the main nav, this is a basic component and you can see here if we scroll down, this is the main nav, and all I'm doing is I don't have to do anything other than import the login context. I'll show you how I'm doing this in a second, but I'm importing the login context. I'm saying, hey, use the login context. Don't use the global context. Use login context. Then I have access to set login open, set form type. Okay. So when a user clicks on the login button, they can set the login to open, and set the form type to login when they click the sign up, set login open, whatever, set sign up. Okay. So it's really awesome because you end up being able to pull in these values and functions from anywhere and use them anywhere. I don't even have to think about where this lives or whatever. I could trigger this after someone buys something if you want to open the navigation or something. Literally anywhere I want to use it. I just use context, import the login context. Now, another fun thing that I do that some people may not like is I like to import from an index file. In my global state folder, I have an index.js. This simply exports everything from login window, checkout, and alert. Now, why is this important if we're only defining these contexts and grouping them? It means that I no longer have to, if I import context, right, login context, I don't have to import it from imports UI global state login window. I have to just import it from imports global state UI, and that's it. It just recognizes it with the index file. Now, this is really cool because if you're in a situation where you want to use the login context as well as the shopping cart context or the alert context, which is somewhat frequently, you could import them all just by saying alert context in here. And I don't have to have two separate import statements. It's just something I like to do. You'll see I do it for my utilities and my elements as well. So that's just something I do. I don't do it for all components, just stuff like that. Okay. So this is how I do everything. This is it. I simply just wrap my app in that. I have all of my state living in either use state or use provider or I mean use not provider, use reducer or any of those. It's exceedingly simple. And okay, so here's some of the cool things about this, right? If you want to use just state, you're just compose or reducer or whatever you can. But let's say you wanted to save something that persisted via local state or local storage, right? You could use local storage hook in here and have it saved just like you state, and now you have persistent global state without having to apply it globally like some of the packages do. So like some of the I think the Apollo one provides it, but it's like global. Um, could be wrong on that. But this way you have full control over, okay, now this is going to be saved in local storage so it can persist, or it's just going to be a quick little use state. Another cool thing that this allows you to do is create these little functions. So, for instance, I have a reset alert function that simply runs my set alert from the use state. It sets the text to blank. It sets the type to success because those are the defaults, and it sets active to false. That my alert's like a little pop-up message. You've probably seen it. It just pops up, and this is how I trigger this. Um, Looks like I might have changed this file. There we go. So that's pretty much the meat in here. As long as you provide all of these things into your value of your context provider, you are good to go. It's really super cool, and I find myself using it constantly. I mean, even just these simple open the login or whatever. It's just so simple. I didn't have to bring in another library, regardless of how small. The reason I moved away from local state was there was huge issues with testing in Apollo local state. And the Apollo team, for as amazing as they are, they hadn't addressed these changes and it was breaking all of my tests. So anytime I wrote a test that used local state, it just flat out wouldn't work if it had a default value. That is, I can't do it. So I had to move off of Apollo state and to show you a little bit of the testing story for this because um, testing is sort of a big thing. I have basically all you need to do is import the context. You'll see I've imported my individual context, so the checkout context, and then I've wrapped my component in that context provider. And then I pass in the value of the things that that component uses, but those are just mock functions. So I've defined some mock jest functions. I've passed them into the value here in my checkout provider. And that way, when add to cart, like the actual component, you click on the button and you add to cart should be run with the item and set checkout open should be set to true. In my test, I can come in here and say, oh, expect add to cart have been called one time. Expect set to checkout open to have been called one time. So that way we know that when the user clicks the button, that these functions are going to be run from the context itself, not from just whatever, right? They're being run from context. So this is, or yeah. So this is, I mean, this is really it. I'm open to questions if anybody has any. Again, this setup is just sort of thrown together and purely custom. And I've been loving its simplicity. I'm all about simplicity in this sort of thing. So to me, this is really sort of great. The most intense one of these I have is the checkout provider, where you have the checkout open, you have the cart as an array full of items, you have the plan if they're subscriber, you have the coupon, and some of these are pretty interesting, but nothing really crazy. Yeah. Okay, so I'm open to questions. If anybody has any questions, you can ask questions about my context setup. You can ask questions about the Level Up Tutorials website. You can ask questions about React Spring. You can ask questions about Tailwind CSS because apparently people got their feathers ruffled a little bit from the syntax episode today. um, okay. Have you found any use for UseReducer in the setup? You know what? I think UseReducer probably would come into handy in some of my checkout stuff where it gets a little bit more complex, where you're adding and removing items from the cart. But to be honest, I haven't. I just haven't needed it. UseReducer is, for those of you who don't know, it's basically use state, but allows you to have actions and dispatch actions and stuff like that. It feels a little bit more like Redux, but again, is just basically another way to set state. I haven't found a need for it. I think people who like reducers might like it. I have always just been a fan of the quick and easy set state functions. Do you recommend context with an HTTP request? You know what? I haven't, because my whole API is in Apollo, I haven't used it at all to do that. I've only used it for this kind of state, like interface state, that I want to control globally. Any sort of time that I'm working with data coming in, it's all through Apollo. So I can't recommend or comment on it either way just because I haven't used it. Any performance problems so far? No, absolutely none. I think that was part of the reason why I separated all of my providers into different providers because, I mean, the only big one is the checkout one. And to be honest, if somebody's modifying the cart or the plan or the coupon or the checkout open, all this stuff's so related that the components that are going to re-render because of one of these changes happens, uh, chances are there any of these changes would re-render the exact same component. So I haven't seen any performance issues whatsoever. It's been really smooth. Will this be a video? Yes, this will be a video. It should be available right after at the same URL. I don't think YouTube changes the URL. Do you have a guide to learn hooks? I do. I have a new course that came out 2 months ago. Let's come to the real website called React Hooks for Everybody. Let me paste it in here. And this uses all of the hooks. We write custom hooks. We do a little bit of animation, tiny bit. We write some complex hooks. We get into some of the more unused ones, like use layout effect and when to use that. We talk about real practical examples too. So stuff in there. If you can have a provider ready for anywhere to use, why the need to have them merged into a there is no need to have them merged. It's not based out of need. It's based out of me wanting my app to look like this rather than be several layers deep of different providers. It's really just cosmetic. It's not important at all. I'm more likely to have to get into edit this file rather than have to edit the context providers themselves. So like I don't want this to be, I don't know. It sounds like a stupid reason now that I'm saying it out loud, but I like the simplicity of this. In which cases do you think that Redux would be a better fit? Redux would definitely be a better fit if you're bringing in data from a lot of sources. if you need more control, it's more complex. If I wasn't using Apollo for my data, right? If I wasn't bringing in data from Apollo, I would be using Redux on this site because this site's data needs are complex enough that it would probably benefit from Redux. But that said, I had Redux in the site before I moved to Apollo, and it worked really well. I've been very happy with Apollo, so not using it right now. Have you seen any way of sharing global state with util functions to ease calculation parameters? I mean, that's sort of what I'm doing. Global state with utility functions that just do this thing, and the only requirement here is that this isn't a file that has anything. The only requirement here is that you end up bringing in that use context hook, use context. Um, And have you tried writing tests with React hooks? Edgar's, I did a whole section. Once this video goes live, rewind it. I did a whole section on this um, about testing. I use React testing library. It, um, in my opinion, is easier to write tests with React testing library because when they it's like when they upgraded to React hooks, React testing library just worked. I didn't have to do anything different with Enzyme. I've heard Enzyme isn't necessarily as easy of an upgrade path. So for here, I didn't like the hardest part of my test is making sure that the GraphQL Apollo queries work. But the actual testing the implementation or not testing implementation details with React testing library has been very, very nice. Especially using this stuff, been super duper easy. Can you walk through how context provider does what it does? Yeah, state. Context provider is just a function that accepts some children, which is basically your app. And it returns this provider function, provider composer function that has all of the contexts. Okay, so I created a bunch of contexts. Now, in my provider composer function, it takes the context and the children. The children just get passed through via React clone element. And then it just says, hey, context, reduce right. And here's your parent, which is going to be the context, and your kids are going to be the kids will be the children or the previous ones. Basically, what that does is it just takes the three and it just turns them into a pyramid of provider, provider, provider. It seriously does nothing but makes my code a little bit cleaner in my app.js. All it does is make this cleaner. That's it. Nothing fancy. Okay, let's see. Are you are you are you reactive approach for your website? What do you recommend? Fetch live query subscription. I used to be fully reactive when I was using Meteor. I haven't really found the need. Now I'm using Apollo and I do optimistic UI. So, for instance, when somebody let's do the autoplay. I don't know if that's its own component. Playlist autoplay. When somebody clicks the playlist autoplay, it runs the mutation, but it also optimistically responds as if the query was going to be successful and then updates the cache accordingly. So I'm dealing with my Apollo cache. And because the cache is happening, the update's happening, the components that need to re-render will re-render. I don't know. I can't recommend anything other than this because it's what I use and I like it. Somebody says, "Why do you hate Tailwind?" I can't tell if you're trolling or not. No, I don't hate Tailwind. All we said on the podcast today was that uh, we would have to try it or we could be convinced, but I don't like the look of it at first glance or something. We didn't even say that. I said there's a lot of classes, and all these Tailwind fans are going nuts saying that we hate Tailwind. I never said that at all. People didn't even listen. Um, can you use Hasura uh, for WND point? I don't know a WND point, but Hasura looks pretty cool. I haven't used it myself personally, but it looks cool. Have an eye on it. Performance wise, which is better? React hooks are class based state and components. I don't think there's a performance change either way there. I just don't think it's. If it is, I don't know about it. Um, Either way, I don't think that choice is going to sync your app in performance wise, regardless. I have a file with only helper functions, so hooks can't be called outside of a functional component. That's very true. Um, so you need functional components or function-based components. And I don't have a helper file necessarily, but I have a file that has my context in it, and I'm pulling the state out of the context here. To me, that's just as good, if not better. Is the router React Router or Reach Router? This is React Router. This site was built a long time ago at this point. Initially built in Meteor Blaze and then converted over to React, I think at version 14 or something. Um, and so this site has seen a lot of changes. And I am not ripping out the routing system. Is Reach looks very nice. Props to Reach. Um, uh, yeah, but I just can't rip my router out. That'd be too much work. Do you prefer any library for React localization? Haven't done localization. Don't know. What's that switch component? Switch components from React Router just determines a route. The Facebook said there would be the Facebook said there was a gain with performance with hooks. Okay. Uh, my app wasn't slow before hooks, and it's not slow after hooks. So, like I said, that performance change isn't going to sync you either way. I write all my stuff using hooks and functions, not because of the performance benefit right now, but because it looks nice and it feels nice and it makes me feel good. So whatever that performance benefit is, if it is, like, I don't think you're going to notice that kind of stuff. Um, but that's pretty much it. I know my stream quality probably hasn't been great. I get the okay resolution uh thing from YouTube here. So I'm ready to wrap this up. If anybody has any more questions, please ask them now. Otherwise, I think we're going to end it on that. Again, um if you want to learn React hooks, leveluptutorials.com. If you want to learn um yeah, I have a lot of courses: Figma, Gatsby, Vue.js, React, just all lots of courses. These links don't work right now, or else I click them. If you want to learn how to do this kind of animation, check out React Spring. Animating React is going to be available for purchase on April 30th or for pros. Somebody says, what about the backend? My backend system is via Apollo and Meteor. Meteor doesn't do a whole lot for it. Uh, it's just Apollo, really, when you think about it. I have some resolvers and I have some types and all that stuff. It's all Apollo. Nothing crazy. Um, and then this API just exists. I connect to it. The site is server rendered in React. So all my React components are rendered server side. Yeah. Somebody says React or Vue in 2019. I'm going to be using React. Hooks haven't really like changed anything. I guess they've changed a lot. Hooks have changed lots of my code for the better, but I was going to use React in 2019 before hooks. So I'm not going to say that it's whatever. Vue's great though. Let me tell you, if you're a Vue fan and you liked Vue, I used that GridSum platform in my last tutorial series, and that thing is very nice. The Just the ease of developing sites with Vue and GridSum was really super cool. I'm a big Gatsby fan for React, and it really seems like they're trying to be the Gatsby for Vue. It's done very well. I'm a big fan. That said, Vue's cool too. If you want to use Vue, any of this stuff's cool. Whatever you can build stuff good in. I'm currently learning React. Is it beneficial to skip learning Redux? Ooh, a lot of places use Redux. I would not skip learning Redux. A lot of jobs and companies, their code bases are going to be in Redux. And you will find a lot of job interviews that say you gotta have Redux. So um, I have full control over this code base, right? This is my code base. So I can do whatever I want with it. And if I want to move the whole thing to context or hooks or whatever, I can do it. That said, so many places have a lot of code and they're going to be in Redux, and they're going to stay in, a lot of them are going to stay in Redux. So I would absolutely learn Redux still. I think they just released a new version that has hooks in it. So Redux is still dope. This live stream will be available later. Okay, it depends on, yep. So if you're just trying to get your foot in the door, learn Redux. It's gonna help. It's gonna make you a better developer too. I never really loved writing Redux code, but it made me a better developer, definitely. Um, but yeah, that's gonna be it. Thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. Here's my face once more. Yeah, so yeah, check it out. I should also say we have a podcast, syntax.fm. If you don't know anything about syntax, check it out at syntax.fm. Today we talked about CSS frameworks, Wes Boss and I. Also, go ahead and give Wes Boss's YouTube a subscribe too. He's been doing awesome stuff over there all the time. Um, and yeah, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to try to do these somewhat regularly. So if there's any other topics you'd like to see me cover, potentially, and this might be a nice one. I sort of teased the last topic at the end of this one. Maybe it would be a good idea to talk about my design system, how I'm building that, because I'm building a nice little design system here in Figma. And it's pretty darn neat. So if you're interested in maybe learning a little bit about how I've approached building a design system and working on a new design, I bet that'll be a good one. We could also do one on React Spring and React Animations. But that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.